Here we go. Hi you guys, this is Rachel here, the Modern Shaman. Thanks for being with me for another YouTube Q&A video. Although today's a little different because it's not actually a question that you all sent in. It's just an A video, not a Q, just the A. I cracked myself up. So not funny, but in my head it was funny. It's just answer time. I'm just gonna talk. So to be honest with you, Spirit's been putting on my heart for a while, y'all. I'm embarrassed to admit, as a spiritual teacher, Spirit's been poking me about sharing and making this video for a while. But I've had so many things come into the queue and the lineup for questions that I always felt like, oh, I should answer people and that should be more prominent or relevant. But yesterday I had a session with a client I've had for a while, and Spirit, through that session, put a big billboard in my face again as a reminder to make this video. So today is a topic of my choosing, and it's a little different because I'm basically going to storytell a little bit, or to tell you something about me, but it's not really about me. It was just an experience I had. And it's my awareness from Spirit wanting me to share this, that there is a relevancy for our time right now, for the ascension of the planet as we are moving into higher dimensional resonance and frequency as a whole, that we are moving into dimensional space that allows for what I'm sharing. So that being said, I want to say, like, get comfy, sit tight, and listen up. So what is, like, the topic of today is about multi-dimensions. So I want to say about 10 years ago, is before my daughter was born, I had a dream for 5 consecutive nights in a row. It wasn't a dream so much as it was a portaled dimensional space that I went into every evening during sleep time. And it was a very long time. If you think about how much you experience during dream time, it was like living an entire life, because it was 5 consecutive nights outside of our realm of time in a different dimensional space. Now, I knew that this was a sacred dream. I'm going to call it a dream, but I'm using that term loosely. I knew this was a sacred space because I had never had that experience before, where when I would fall asleep, I would move straight into the same dream scenario. It was the same character, and it would pick back up with the same storyline or plot line or same framework that I was in. By framework, I mean just like the setting, the characters, the timeline, the experience. It all was sequential and was always the same setup. Now, the experiences that I had within that realm were different each night, but it all kind of continued as one long story. At the end of that 5 days, I thought, what in the heck do I do with this experience? What is this, Spirit? And I knew, and Spirit said, you're supposed to share it. And so at that time, I thought, okay, I'll write a book about it. So, because it was so intricate, the characters were so detailed, there was so much to it. I couldn't possibly just talk through it. I thought I have to write it all down. So frantically, I picked up a piece of paper and a pen, and I wrote. I just started writing, and I wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. And when I finished it, I realized, like, this is not enough for a book. I just wrote what I remembered, but I didn't have I didn't have a book. I didn't have like an introduction that sets up your characters, that gives the background story of their characters. I mean, even video games have that now. They have like the little background where they give the info of the character before you start playing the game. I didn't have any of that set up, and I thought, okay, gosh, I can share it, but I don't know how to share it. It's kind of frazzled and in pieces. So I would kind of work on the characters a bit here and a bit there, but essentially it got put aside. It got put in a drawer. It got put in my bedside drawer. And Spirit even gave me a title for it, and the title was Blurred, because of what I will share about my experience. And so it sat in my bedside table in that drawer for years, and then I think I eventually threw it out. I just thought, it's not relevant anymore. Well, Spirit had another plan. Because they started poking at me recently, bringing up people talking about things that are exactly what I saw in that dream space or portaled construct 10 years ago. And I was like, man, that's exactly like my experience. So much so that I knew Spirit was knocking on my door to share. So since I had this venue open in terms of YouTube, I decided to share it here. Maybe you have had a similar experience in some way, shape, or form. I know yesterday when I had a client, they started sharing an experience, and I'm like, I know that space. I know those people. That is an actual location. That's kind of what made me feel like sharing. So the title of the book was going to be Blurred, because of the state of consciousness that I always went into when the dream began. So when I fell asleep, this space that was created was a fifth dimensional construct, or a fifth dimensional matrices. Okay, I can compare it to a computer construct, like a game or a matrix or a system set up. But it was our world, it was our planet, it was Earth, and it was very normal. It was Earth. It was not a different planet that was parallel to ours or a tangent universe. It was Earth, but it was fifth dimensional. And it wasn't just dimensional, it was a fifth dimensional construct. So it was a fifth dimensional matrices is what it felt like to me. And the way that I always got there or arrived into that matrix was through gamma brainwave states. So I would begin to fall asleep, and I would feel the sensation of it. And for those of you that are clairsentients or empaths and very sensitive to frequencies or sensation of non-physical energy, to me, it felt like butterflies, similar to the way that when you blink really fast or someone blinks against your skin, there's a flutter here that's very subtle and soft on the inside of my skull that would rise up to the tip of the bone inside of my skull and hold there. It's like this, like little flutters at the very tip of the inside of my skull. So I would fall asleep, and this sensation would overcome me, and I would know I'm going to this construct. I know I'm going to the fifth dimensional matrix. So when I was there, essentially I would enter, and I will tell you at the beginning, it was a little jarring. Like I would enter into this realm where it was just like our Earth, or just like our three-dimensional construct. But there were some people that had blurred vision. And I came to realize after I had this dream night after night and kept coming back to this construct, that was a sign that they were also in that matrix. Because you could be within the fifth dimensional matrix and be static at a 3D vibrational state. So you could still, it was like two, you know how dimensions overlap, right? Let me give you this. So like this is a 2D piece of paper, right? It's flat. Well, it's not, because this is someone's file and there's papers in there. But imagine it's just a flat piece. It's a two-dimensional object, but we're viewing it in 3D, right? So the same is true in that dimensional construct. There would be people there that were 3D people, and their eyes would be very clear and straightforward and linear. And their pupils would be linear. And there would be others, like myself when I was in that construct, that would have blurred, what I would call blurred vision. And this was my identifiable. It was like a haze or a film. They could still look and use their pupils regular. It wasn't like their eyes were back in their head or creepy zombie eyes. It was regular vision. It just had a subtle film over it of luminance. Because our color spectrum, you could see more light. It was like it's like not like a contact lens, but sort of. It was your regular eyes. But it was as if the gamma rays were letting in more luminance or light. This is why I had trouble. It's hard to explain it, but anyways, and so you were able to perceive all that was going on in that fifth dimensional matrices because your eyes were essentially blurred, but essentially it wasn't blur as in the way we would use that term now. It was letting in more light and having an ocular ability that had more of the color spectrum and visibility to light. And the oscillations with that, like density variances in that light. So I called those people blurred. And that was a common kind of language that people use, like, oh, she's blurred, or oh, he's blurred. And you could be going about your day in the three-dimensional world, just like our world here, and essentially activate those brain waves. You would kind of slow the 3D and move up into, it would kind of go like this in your brain, into that fluttering state and blur. And they kind of used it like that, like a verb, and then also as an adjective to describe those that were blurred at that state. And they would be living in the same realm, but living in the fifth dimensional matrices versus the third dimensional matrices. So they were multidimensional on top of each other. They were integrated and utilizing the same space. But those that were 5D had different rules because it was a different matrix or a different program. Say it's a computer program, okay? Like that. It's a different structure or construct that we were living within. And within that, time did not have the lengthy delay because the density of the light was it was higher. It was less density, right? It wasn't as heavy. So it wasn't sluggish to move things into projected visibility, manifestation, right? So imagine a projector screen that doesn't have a time delay between when it's projected and when the light shows up or presents itself, right? If you're thinking of a holographic experience within the matrices, it was like that. So the density of the light was much lighter or less dense, and therefore things would appear instantaneously without that time delay. They would seem instantaneous to those in 3D. So within that construct, when you were blurred and living within the fifth dimensional construct, you could, anything you thought of, anything you initiated in your mind would show up. So you had to be trained in how to do this because it could be detrimental if you were fearful, because any of your fears would manifest. And this is what they called like the bugs in the computer system, basically fear. But this was, and it literally a lot of times manifested like bugs. I don't know if people have a lot of fears of bugs, but I would be walking around in that construct and somebody you could tell was having a traumatic experience, and you'd look over and there'd be this huge spider attacking them or eating an arm or something. It was just like, ugh, because they couldn't get control of their own fears. And they would manifest that and essentially then kind of get bumped back into 3D and couldn't hold the gamma brainwave state that was required for being blurred and staying in that fifth dimensional construct. So you had to be trained in it, essentially trained to know how to negate or neuter fear. And by negate, you don't go negative. So I'm talking about a math equation here. So in energy terms of an energetic charge, positive versus negative, you would have to find the 0 point or that null point of energy to where it's not positive and it's not negative in order to not manifest that fear. So people were trained in this, and before they were allowed, not really allowed, but before they would want to go into the blurred state. There wasn't like a governing body keeping you from doing it, but you wouldn't want to go into that experience and have a horrific trip being there. So there was training and preparation there and kind of learning from it. Let me see. My story was mine alone, meaning I was the character. I had a different name, but I was still me, and I was aware that I was my soul in this construct. Meaning I didn't have a loss of memory or a loss of my previous lives or a loss of my current life here. I was still completely me, in this space, but I did have a different name. I also still had my same body. It wasn't like an avatar body. I still had my same body. I actually looked the same. I still had all the aspects of my 3D experience. It just moved me into a different brainwave state. And so I was able to view more. It was suddenly like I could see more of what was going on. I could see all the other people that were in that same construct. And I could manifest and experience things in a completely different timeline. So the interesting thing about time in that dimensional space is that manifestations or projections of light of objects, right? Because that's essentially what objects are. It's not even really matter. It's just energy, right? And we are perceiving the light. We're perceiving that energy through the expression of light. So and that's even in 3D, right? I'm not using any 5D language there. Y'all stay with me. This is why I was like, this is a crazy freaking dream. But it wasn't a dream. But when that happened, the manifestations were instantaneous, okay? Because light appeared like that without the heaviness of our current 3D density. But when I wanted to have an experience, a conversation, an interaction, I wanted to, mostly interaction, then I could have the experience of time. But I was aware that we were agreeing to that experience in creating that time. And so essentially, it was like we would give ourselves a little capsule or a bubble of time to have an experience that would feel linear. So manifestations of locations were instantaneous because it's not like we really, really wanted to experience driving 8 hours to a location or flying 8 hours. We didn't have to do that. So going from place to place was instantaneous. I learned after a while that it was much easier if I gave myself a door. So I would manifest certain doors because I would get kind of confused as to where I was, because a lot of it is very similar looking. And you know, a lot of cities look the same when you go into the cityscape. I mean, it's our regular world here. And a lot of them, unless you know identifiable factors or you make a point to always arrive at the same street sign, or like I did, I would always arrive at the same door. And so I realized, okay, if these doorways really help me know where I am. And so when I was moving from place to place through instantaneous thought, this is similar to portaling. I would create a doorway that, like, my home always had this swinging like little saloon door. So obviously I would recognize my home, but sometimes I would portal to that place and I would be outside or in the backyard or not like directly in the same room or on the street or something. And the same was true of restaurants or cities, or there was like a mall kind of place that I would go. So, and those would have different doors, like a old 50s diner door I made one time. So I would kind of give myself this regular awareness. It just helped me get my bearings every time I was moving from place to place. And those were instantaneous. Then when I wanted to have an interaction, mostly of emotions, emotional interactions required a sense of time. And I realized that because when they happen instantaneous, there's no buildup, there's no charge to the energy. And this was wild. Like, I realized, like, look, I can have that conversation or I can have that experience like that, but it's not the same. I don't want it like that. So how do I create in a fifth dimensional realm? I have to, without changing the oscillation of my brainwave state out of gamma and becoming unblurred and moving back into 3D, how do I create a construct within a construct to experience time so that the energy can charge up? I can be in anticipation of our conversation. I can look forward to it. I can think of things. I can, it's funny how much our experience, whether it's positive or negative, has to do with that. It has to do with our emotional buildup and then relief or achievement or connection point with that buildup of energy. So what we would do in that realm is essentially create a capsule, an agreed upon capsule. So I would meet with a friend, or there would be a character that I wanted to hang out with. We would meet at that location, and essentially, almost like you would set a timer, we would set a sense of agreed upon experience time. We do this a little bit in 3D when we're like, I need to put it in my schedule. I have an hour to hang out with you. And we both agree we have an hour and we're leaving at 5 o'clock or whatever. But we don't often do this in our everyday experiences, like dinner or I don't know, whatever it is. We just kind of go with the flow. So this is different because time didn't flow like that. So we would have to create an experience of flow and then put ourselves in it and experience it. And then there's finality to it. And you could have that. And then when you're done, you can instantaneously kind of like portal or think of somewhere else and move into that location. Okay, this is already 21 minutes long. I don't want to make this video too long. I don't know that there's relevance of sharing the storyline of the story that I was in. It was relevant for me at the time. But I don't feel like Spirit is putting that on my heart to share what I was going through and why it was, and the 5D matrix perspective of that. However, I will say, like I shared earlier, it was still my body. It wasn't like a separate avatar. And so the experience that I had in the 5D, when I would wake up in the 3D, would be transferred into my form. This is another way I knew this was not a dream. Because my form, my human 3D body, was still experiencing what I was experiencing in that realm. Okay? So let me give you an example. If I was pregnant in the dream, I would have symptoms and literal action in my human uterus and body that mimic that. If I was having an experience of anger or a fight or frustration, I would wake up and still have the energy of that present in the body. There were aspects of it that when that was present, it was still delineated through my 3D body. Okay. The reason I share that with you guys is because I do feel like our planet is on an ascension path. This is not new. I'm not saying anything you don't already know, right? To vibrate in a higher matrices. And as that begins to happen, you may begin to have similar experiences. And this was a very positive experience for me. It wasn't a negative space at all. It's only negative if you're not trained in how to nullify fear. That is the bug. So, all that being said, I think that is a beautiful practice for us here. Nullifying is the emotional charge. So when you feel a fear, being able to move to a place where you're no longer emotionally charged by it. It just doesn't matter. It doesn't really, it's fake, it's not real, it's plastic to you. There's no personal damage. It's just like, not really real. You're able to move to a place to nullify that. I think that practice as a meditation practice would be so beneficial as we continue to move through our ascension on this earth. So I hope that was a blessing to you guys. I realize if I sat here and shared all of my wild experiences that I've had in this body or in other forms or other spaces, it would just go on forever. And this is just it's just my life. It is what it is. But I hope that it in some way, shape, or form was a blessing to you all. And that wherever you can take little tidbits of areas that you resonate with or feel like Spirit is speaking to you, that it be freely yours, that you take it and be blessed by it. That's my hope, at least. All right, I will be back here next week with another video. Bye, you guys.